Have you ever noticed that your greatest breakthroughs never come when you're desperately trying to figure everything out? They come in the shower, during a walk, right before you fall asleep, when your mind finally stops its relentless chatter and something deeper can emerge. Have you ever experienced that moment when you've been wrestling with a problem for hours, only to have the perfect solution appear the instant you give up and let go? Maybe you've felt trapped in your own head, spinning the same thoughts in endless loops, analyzing every decision to the point of frustration, planning for scenarios that will never happen. Perhaps you've noticed how the harder you think about being happy, the more miserable you become. How the more you try to force a solution, the more elusive it becomes. How the tighter you grip onto control, the more everything seems to slip away. What if I told you that everything you've been taught about the power of thinking is backwards? What if the very mind you've been relying on to solve your problems has actually been creating most of them? What if the constant stream of thoughts running through your head isn't helping you navigate life? It's preventing you from truly living. Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese sage who founded Taoism over 2,500 years ago, discovered something that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. The thinking mind, for all its apparent sophistication, is often the greatest obstacle to wisdom, peace, and authentic action. He called this principle Wu Wei, effortless action that emerges when we stop forcing and start flowing. But this isn't about becoming mindless or passive. This is about accessing a level of intelligence so profound, so intuitive, that it operates beyond the limitations of conceptual thinking. This is about discovering that when you stop thinking, you don't lose your mind. You find your true self. If you've ever felt exhausted by your own thoughts, overwhelmed by endless mental chatter, or frustrated by how thinking harder seems to make everything more complicated, then you're ready for one of the most liberating discoveries in human history. Because when you truly understand what Lao Tzu knew, when you learn to operate from this place of effortless awareness, everything in your life begins to transform in ways you never thought possible. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you approach every challenge, every relationship, every moment of your existence. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. The prison of perpetual thinking. Right now, as you're watching this video, there's probably a voice in your head commenting on what I'm saying. Maybe it's agreeing, disagreeing, comparing this to something else you've heard, or already planning what you'll do after this video ends. That voice never stops, does it? From the moment you wake up until you fall asleep, there's a constant stream of mental activity, planning, worrying, remembering, judging, analyzing, commenting. Most people believe this mental chatter is who they are. They identify so completely with their thoughts that they can't imagine existence without them. But Lao Tzu saw through this illusion over 2 millennia ago. He understood that this thinking mind, which we've elevated to the status of our identity, is actually a sophisticated survival tool that has outlived its usefulness and now creates more problems than it solves. The Tao Te Ching opens with these enigmatic words. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. What Lao Tzu was pointing to is profound. Reality itself cannot be captured by thinking, by concepts, by mental models. The moment you try to grasp life with your mind, you've already missed it. It's like trying to catch water with a net. The very attempt ensures failure. Modern neuroscience has validated what Lao Tzu intuited. The default mode network of the brain, which becomes active during rest and introspection, is associated with rumination, worry, and self-referential thinking. Dr. Judson Brewer's research shows that this network is hyperactive in depression and anxiety disorders. In other words, the more we think, especially about ourselves and our problems, the more we suffer. But here's what's really happening. Your thinking mind operates in the past and future. It's constantly pulling you away from the only moment where life actually exists. Right now. It creates problems by projecting fears into an imaginary future or dragging unresolved pain from the past into the present moment. It spins stories about who you are, what you need, what's wrong, what's missing, what could go wrong, what should have been different. Eckhart Tolle, whose teachings align closely with Taoist principles, puts it perfectly. You are not your mind, you are the awareness behind the thoughts. But most people have never experienced this awareness because they're so identified with the thinking process that they can't step back and observe it. The cruel irony is that the very tool we use to try to solve our problems, thinking, is what creates most of our suffering. Anxiety is thinking about future problems that may never happen. Depression is often thinking about past events we can't change. Stress is the mind's resistance to what is actually happening right now. Lao Tzu observed this pattern and discovered something revolutionary. Stop thinking and end your problems. This isn't anti-intellectual advice. This is recognizing that there's a deeper intelligence available to us when we're not trapped in the narrow bandwidth of conceptual thinking. But what does this intelligence look like? How does it operate, and how do we access it? This is where Lao Tzu's most profound teaching comes in. Wu Wei, the art of effortless action. Wu Wei, the intelligence beyond thought. Wu Wei is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in all of philosophy. Often translated as non-action or doing nothing. It's actually the opposite of passivity. Wu Wei is action that emerges from a place of deep attunement to the natural flow of circumstances. It's intelligence without interference. It's responding rather than reacting. It's being moved by wisdom rather than driven by mental compulsion. Lao Tzu wrote, "The sage is guided by what he feels and not by what he sees." This isn't about being emotional or impulsive. This is about accessing a level of knowing that transcends the limited perspective of analytical thinking. It's about feeling into the situation with your entire being and allowing the appropriate response to emerge naturally. Think about the times in your life when you were in the zone, when you were so absorbed in an activity that self-consciousness disappeared, when actions flowed effortlessly, when you seemed to know exactly what to do without thinking about it. Athletes call this flow state. Musicians know it as being in the groove. Writers experience it when words pour onto the page without effort. This is Wu Wei in action. But Wu Wei isn't limited to peak performance or creative activities. It's available in every moment, in every interaction, in every decision. It's the intelligence that knows when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to wait, when to hold on and when to let go, without needing to analyze all the options. The martial artist Bruce Lee, who was deeply influenced by Taoist philosophy, described this perfectly. Be like water making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it. Water doesn't think its way around obstacles. It simply flows according to its nature and the conditions it encounters. This is what happens when thinking stops being the primary mode of operation. Instead of forcing your will upon reality, you begin to sense the natural currents of the situation and move with them. Instead of imposing preconceived solutions, you allow the appropriate response to emerge from a deeper understanding of what's actually needed. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor who shared many insights with Taoist philosophy, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But Lao Tzu went even further. He realized that you don't need to control your mind. You need to recognize that you are not your mind. This recognition creates what Zen Buddhism calls no mind, or mushin, a state of acting without the interference of self-conscious thought. It's not unconsciousness, it's superconsciousness. It's not the absence of intelligence. It's intelligence operating at a level far more sophisticated than conceptual thinking. When you operate from Wu Wei, decisions become effortless because they're not being filtered through endless mental analysis. Relationships become more authentic because you're responding to what's actually happening rather than to your mental interpretation of what's happening. Problems begin to resolve themselves because you're not creating additional problems through mental resistance and overthinking. But how do you actually access this state? How do you stop the perpetual thinking that has become so habitual it feels like breathing? The great letting go. The path to Wu Wei begins with a radical recognition. You cannot think your way to enlightenment. You cannot analyze your way to peace. You cannot mentally construct your way to wisdom. These states emerge when thinking subsides, not when it intensifies. As Lao Tzu taught, in pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In pursuit of the Tao, every day something is dropped. This doesn't mean becoming ignorant or abandoning practical thinking when it's needed. It means recognizing that thinking is a tool, not an identity. It means learning to use your mind rather than being used by it. It means discovering the vast space of awareness that exists when you're not lost in mental commentary about everything that's happening. The first step is simply becoming aware of thinking as a process, rather than identifying with its content. Right now, notice that there are thoughts appearing in your awareness. Notice that these thoughts are not you. They are objects arising in your consciousness, just like sounds or sensations. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear and disappear. This simple shift in perspective is revolutionary. Instead of being carried away by every thought that arises, you begin to rest in the stable awareness that observes thoughts without being disturbed by them. This is what meditation teachers call the witness consciousness, the part of you that remains unchanged whether you're thinking or not thinking, happy or sad, busy or at rest. Lao Tzu expressed this beautifully. Do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? This is the essence of Wu Wei, not forcing action from mental agitation, but allowing clarity to emerge from stillness. When you stop feeding the mental commentary, something extraordinary happens. The natural intelligence of life begins to operate through you. You start responding to situations from a place of deep attunement rather than mental calculation. You begin to sense what's needed without having to figure it out. You start moving in harmony with the flow of circumstances rather than against it. This doesn't happen overnight. The mind has been trained for years to be constantly active, to comment on everything, to analyze every situation. But with practice, you can begin to recognize the difference between necessary thinking and compulsive mental chatter. You can learn to engage your analytical mind when it's useful and let it rest when it's not. Alan Watts, who brought Taoist wisdom to Western audiences, described this perfectly. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. The more you stir up your mental waters with overthinking, the muddier they become. But when you stop stirring, when you allow the mental activity to settle naturally, clarity emerges on its own. This clarity isn't empty or vacant. It's alive, responsive, intelligent. It's what Zen calls beginner's mind, approaching each moment fresh, without the burden of preconceptions and mental habits. It's what Taoists call Pu, the uncarved block, the natural state before conditioning and complexity. From this place of clarity, action becomes effortless because it's aligned with what the situation actually requires, rather than what your mental projections think it requires. The transformation. When mind becomes servant. When you begin to operate from this place of aware presence rather than compulsive thinking, every aspect of your life begins to transform. Problems that seemed insurmountable from the level of mental analysis suddenly have obvious solutions. Relationships become more authentic because you're responding to people as they actually are, rather than to your mental stories about them. Creativity flows because you're not blocking inspiration with self-doubt and overthinking. This is what Lao Tzu meant when he wrote, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." The what I am is the mental identity, the story you tell yourself about who you are, what you can and can't do, what's possible and impossible. When this mental construct relaxes, your true potential can emerge. In relationships, this transformation is particularly profound. Instead of constantly analyzing what people mean, what they're thinking, what you should say next, you begin to simply be present with them. You listen not just to their words, but to the energy behind the words, the unspoken communication that happens when minds are quiet and hearts are open. You stop trying to control how others see you and start authentically expressing what's true in the moment. Paradoxically, this makes you more attractive, more magnetic, because people are drawn to authenticity in a world full of mental performance and social masks. In your work and creative endeavors, you discover what athletes and artists have always known. The best performance happens when the performer gets out of the way. When a pianist stops thinking about which keys to press and allows the music to play through them. When a surgeon stops analyzing every movement and allows their trained skill to operate through clear, present awareness. The Buddhist teacher, Suzuki Roshi, captured this perfectly. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. When you approach each situation with fresh awareness rather than mental preconceptions, you see possibilities that the thinking mind misses entirely. This doesn't mean abandoning expertise or knowledge. It means holding your knowledge lightly, allowing it to inform your actions without being imprisoned by it. It means being willing to not know, to be surprised, to discover something new in situations you thought you had completely figured out. Even in mundane activities, this presence transforms everything. Washing dishes becomes a meditation when you're fully absorbed in the sensation of warm water and soap, rather than thinking about what you'll do next. Walking becomes a practice of mindfulness when you feel your feet touching the ground rather than being lost in mental planning. Lao Tzu observed, "The sage does not attempt anything very big and thus achieves greatness." This is because when you're not forcing outcomes through mental effort, you're aligned with the natural intelligence that accomplishes things effortlessly. You work with life rather than against it. The flow of effortless living. As this way of being becomes more natural, you begin to experience what Taoists call ziran, spontaneous naturalness. Life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a dance. Instead of pushing against circumstances, you learn to read the currents and move with them. Instead of forcing your agenda, you discover how to accomplish more by doing less. This is where the deepest teachings of the Tao Te Ching come alive. The soft overcomes the hard. The weak overcomes the strong. This isn't about being passive or wimpy. This is about understanding that flexibility is stronger than rigidity, that water eventually wears away the hardest rock, not through force, but through persistence and adaptability. In practical terms, this means approaching challenges with curiosity rather than resistance. When something doesn't go according to your plan, instead of immediately thinking, "This is wrong" or "This shouldn't be happening," you pause and ask, "What is this situation trying to teach me? How can I work with these circumstances rather than against them?" You begin to trust the intelligence of life itself. You recognize that the universe is far more complex and interconnected than your thinking mind can comprehend, and that sometimes what appears to be a setback is actually a redirection towards something better. As Lao Tzu wrote, "The Tao gives life to all things and death to all things." This doesn't mean becoming fatalistic or passive. It means recognizing that your highest contribution comes not from forcing your will upon reality, but from aligning your actions with the deeper currents of wisdom that you can sense when your mind is quiet. You start to notice synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to guide you in the right direction. You meet the right person at the right time. The perfect opportunity appears just when you need it. The solution to a problem presents itself in an unexpected way. These aren't magical occurrences. They're the natural result of being attuned to the flow of life rather than being lost in mental preoccupation. The ancient Chinese called this Ti, the power that comes from being aligned with the Tao. It's not power over others or over circumstances. It's the power that emerges when you stop working against life and start working with it. It's the power of water, which nourishes everything without competing with anything. This alignment also brings a profound sense of peace. Not the peace that comes from getting what you want, but the peace that comes from not needing things to be different than they are. You can still have preferences, still work toward goals, still make changes, but you're no longer at war with reality. You're dancing with it. The awakening to presence. What Lao Tzu discovered and what countless sages throughout history have pointed to is that life is not a problem to be solved by thinking. Life is a mystery to be lived through presence. When you stop trying to figure everything out and start paying attention to what's actually here, you discover that this moment contains everything you've been seeking through mental activity. Peace you've been thinking about is available right now when thinking stops. The love you've been analyzing is present in this moment when the mind becomes quiet. The wisdom you've been trying to accumulate is already here when you stop looking for it somewhere else. This is why Lao Tzu taught, at the center of your being, you have the answer. You know who you are and you know what you want. This knowing isn't intellectual. It's not something you can think your way to. It's a direct recognition that emerges when the clouds of mental activity clear and you see what was always already present. The mystic Rumi, whose insights align beautifully with Taoist wisdom, wrote, "Stop acting so small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. But you can only recognize this truth when you stop being lost in the small stories that thinking creates about who you are and what your limitations are. When thinking stops, you don't disappear. You appear, the real you, not the mental construction you've been mistaking for yourself. The you that is connected to everything, that is part of the vast intelligence that moves the stars and grows the trees and beats your heart without any effort from your thinking mind." This recognition brings what can only be called liberation. Liberation from the tyranny of mental commentary. Liberation from the exhausting effort of trying to control outcomes through thinking. Liberation from the suffering that comes from being at war with what is. But this isn't a one-time realization. It's a moment-by-moment choice to rest in awareness rather than getting lost in mental activity. It's a practice of returning again and again to this place of presence, this state of Wu Wei, this natural way of being that requires no effort because it's what you actually are beneath all the mental conditioning. Your invitation to freedom. If this message resonates with something deep within you, if you recognize the truth in what Lao Tzu discovered, then you're ready to begin this most intimate journey, the journey from mental imprisonment to natural freedom. Start simple. Begin to notice the difference between necessary thinking and compulsive mental chatter. When you're solving a practical problem, engaging with work, or planning something important, that's thinking as a tool. But when you're endlessly replaying conversations, worrying about hypothetical futures, or lost in mental commentary about everything that's happening, that's thinking as compulsion. Practice what Zen calls just sitting. Moments throughout your day when you simply rest in awareness without trying to think about anything or accomplish anything mentally. Even 30 seconds of this can be profoundly refreshing to a mind that's been constantly active. Notice how solutions often appear when you stop trying to figure things out. Pay attention to how your best ideas come when your mind is relaxed. Observe how much more present and connected you feel when you're not lost in thought. As you continue exploring these insights, you might find value in other perspectives on presence and awareness. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to join others on this journey of discovering what's possible when we stop being prisoners of our own thinking. Write "I choose presence" in the comments if you're ready to begin this experiment of living from awareness rather than mental compulsion. Let's create a community of people who are discovering the profound freedom that comes when thinking stops being our master and becomes our servant. Remember Lao Tzu's promise? If you correct your mind, the rest of your life will fall into place. But the correction isn't adding more thinking. It's recognizing what you are beyond thought itself. The next video will explore how this recognition transforms not just your inner experience, but how you move through the world. Because when you stop thinking, everything changes, including how the world responds to you. Your journey to effortless living begins now, not through thinking about it, but through being it.